Hello, welcome to another attachment conversation. قبل ما نبتدي في التوبيك والبرزنتر I want to remind you to please scan the QR codes الموجودين في الأوضة to register. It's important for us to know who's interested in what topics so that we're able to also send you لو في أي حاجة ممكن تبقى relevant بعد كده. النهارده our topic is about attachment and grief and meaning making, and there is no one better to talk about this than Salma Seyam. Salma is a graduate student, an alumni in a graduate program here at AUC. She graduated just last year, which is a very proud moment for me when I have a former student join in on an attachment conversation. I feel really proud of our students and where they head to and the things that they do. And I hope that also inspires others كده in the room and كل حد يبقى بيعمل حاجة whether you join here on an attachment conversation أو عامة this idea of talking about what you're doing, it really makes me feel very proud. So welcome Salma to this attachment conversation.
Thank you for having me. I've joined a lot of these and I've attended so many attachment conversations and I've loved them. So I love the fact to be part of this is huge for me. Thank you.
It really makes me so happy. سلمى الثيسس بتاعتها كانت على attachment and grief intensity, meaning making and attachment, among other things. She was also looking at coping strategies and resilience. But her research was really focused on that topic. But if we can start, Salma, by briefly describing what do we mean by these terms when we talk about grief, when we talk about meaning making, what are we talking about? What got you interested in that topic?
I'll actually flip this around and talk about what got me interested, and while I talk about that, discuss some terminologies.
Okay.
So while I was training here in AUC, I saw several clients that were struggling with loss in different ways. Okay? Loss through losing a friendship, losing a house, losing a home, losing a loved one, so many different ways. And I was really, really interested in how people are coping differently. I had clients who reacted in a very tough way and they were crying the whole time and expressing lots of emotions, and other clients who were quite, it seemed like there was nothing impacting them and they were okay and I'm functioning well and I'm okay. And actually they would come and tell me I'm functioning too well, I feel like something's wrong. So it was a very interesting seeing these different kind of reactions to grief. And basically grief is a reaction to loss, whatever this loss might be. It's not specifically a loss of a loved one, it can be so many different types of losses. So I was very interested in that specific aspect. So then I started looking more into grief, and I realized I can't really study grief without studying attachment. Okay? Like they're so interrelated with each other. What attachment theory does is provide a framework to understanding why people react the way they react to grief. Okay? Attachment theory discusses how developmentally, how children react when their caregiver is not there or they're there. Okay? And when we study this kind of separation, we're able to see how a child reacts, whether it's through despair, whether it's through being calm, whether it's through when their mother comes back, whatever caregiver comes back, their reaction being they hug the mother, they hug their caregiver, what do they do? Okay? And what attachment theory says is this reaction suggests a kind of reaction in adulthood, in the kind of grief reaction. What attachment theory does is provide a language to understanding grief. Okay? That's how I saw it. And currently, modern theories all go towards this aspect. In the past, it actually looked at detachment. Okay, so Freud's psychoanalytic theory in the past looked at something called decataxis. And decataxis is removing mental and emotional load from an object, a person, or thing. So he believed, or this theory believed, that to move on from grief, and using the words moving on, you have to detach. Okay? So that you could put this energy into something else. This is the kind of concept. But more modern theories say, no, actually, we need to realign this kind of attachment and reintegrate it in our life without the physical presence of the person.
ده هنا لما نتكلم عن حاجات زي continuing bonds with the person and so on.
Exactly.
Before we get into the attachment aspect a bit more, can you also talk to us about this idea of meaning making? لما نتكلم على meaning making and grief, what do we mean by meaning making, and what are the different ways people can make meaning from those?
Before we get into the grief aspect, let's talk about meaning making. There's this French philosopher, he says, and we're condemned to make meaning. Okay? Like condemned is a very tough word, but in reality, this is it. We are beings who are constantly striving to make meaning of things. We want to understand what's happening, we want to understand why we're here, we have these existential concerns, just like Tunay was talking about in the last attachment conversation, about things that are constantly on our minds, and we try to make sense of the life we live and try to make sense of ourselves too. Okay? What happens is when we experience a suffering, a trauma, a loss, these meaning structures we built since we were children either shatters, or it's shaken, or it's just slightly moved, but something happens to it. Okay? We go through another process of reconstructing our meaning structures. Okay? For example, if our meaning structures was, before it was very religiously based, okay? If we lose a loved one in a way that seemed unfair to us or unjust, we start questioning this religion, we start questioning our basis of what we understood. It shatters one's own identity in a sense. Okay? When it comes to grief, specifically what happens is, there's this theory, it's called the meaning reconstruction theory. Okay? And it looks specifically at how we reconstruct meaning after grief. And it says there's 3 main points. Okay? It's first off, identity reconstruction. So for example, Anna, after a grief experience, if you've lost a son, a daughter, a father, you lose the identity of you being a sibling, a daughter. You lose the identity of what you once were. Okay? So you go through the process of who am I now? Who am I without this person? Who am I without this identity? Okay? Another example someone was just recently talking about is in the Egyptian families when there's only one son and the dad passes away, so then the son is promoted to a role of being the family caregiver, the number one of the family, and they might not be ready at all for this role. Okay? But they're suddenly promoted, suddenly put in this position. But here they question, who am I? What am I ready for this? There's so much losses that isn't just the person. There's so much context around it.
Yes.
Okay?
I really like when you're saying that, Kamen, and you're shedding light on the fact that when you lose someone, if we're talking about loss of a loved one here, it's not just that you're losing a person, but you're also losing a part of you, a role that you once had, or you're grieving. It's a chapter that's ending in general, hatta with parts of you, not just the person who is lost. Yeah.
That's a huge part. You're not losing the person, just the person. You're losing so many aspects in your life, and you're losing part of yourself. There's a theory that says that part of you also dies, okay? Which can sound very, very hard to say, but that's the reality of the situation. This is one part of the meaning reconstruction theory. The second part is sense making. Okay, so you're making sense of 3 things: who you are, your relationship to the person, which is the attachment-based aspect, and how you lost the person. Okay? So there's 3 aspects that you're trying to make sense of and trying to realign into your own narrative. Okay? And then the third thing, which can sound also very tough, is something called benefit finding. Okay? When we're talking about grief and saying benefits, it can seem like, what benefits do we have from losing someone? That's when benefits in this case is not really benefits. The idea of benefiting in a way, it's what life lessons do you learn, what kind of resilience, how do you grow, how do you adapt, also what kind of, this can be very well to positive away in a sense, but it's not positivity. It's like what kind of gratitude can you take away from this? What kind of memories do you hold on to that remind you of a good life you've lived with this person and so on? It's looking towards what can you gather from this? And even if you didn't have a good relationship with the person, does this tell you, okay, I want to achieve better relationships? What kind of life lesson, what have you learned from these experiences?
And to clarify things more, are we talking here about conscious decisions that the person is making, and I want to make sense in that way, I want to feel more grateful, I want to think about it in a different sense? Or are we talking about more of something that's happening unconsciously, this is how I'm adapting or I'm making sense of things?
It's both. Okay, so there is a big conscious aspect of it where you're actively thinking and actively trying to make meaning of the situation. And there's a big part of it that's also unconscious, a part of it that's just based on your own upbringing, based on the context, based on who's around you, and you find yourself going in this way. But what we do in therapy is try to make it conscious, is try to go through a narrative structure. So how are we looking at this? How can you explain what happened? How can you talk it through? How can you talk about the impact it's had on you? We do try to bring it forward.
بس حلو قوي ان احنا ناخدها هنا من حته انه a part of this is unconscious and a part of this comes from certain patterns that we're used to, our upbringing, how we generally deal with things. We deal with adversities or challenges. But if we bring in attachment here, from the research that you've done and from clinical practice and with working with clients, how do you see attachment coming into that process? How do people with different attachment styles deal with grief differently?
Okay. Let's talk about the two main dichotomies, insecure attachment and secure attachment, before we get more into the insecure attachment. Someone with insecure attachment, when we talk about grief, before we were talking about the meaning structures and how it shatters. If someone has a meaning structure before that was more secure, was more aligned with their values and so on, once the loss happens, the reconstruction is, let's say, easier. Okay? Or they're able to realign it and reconstruct it in a pattern that it doesn't experience too many ups and downs. So if you've had an insecure attachment, and then you experience that, it makes it harder to reconstruct meaning. Okay? It just makes it more difficult. Okay? In the sense of trying to reach out to support systems, coping in a way that's not, I'm not talking about adaptive coping or not reacting and trying to function and so on, but allowing yourself to do these things in a safe, feeling safe while doing these things. It's the essence of safety and security. But if you don't have those essences, it makes it harder to go through this process.
What you're talking about here is that insecure attachment is usually related to coping strategies that are not very healthy. You wouldn't reach out to a lot of people. مش هقول إن أنا محتاجة support. And this is one of the ways it would be harder to reach this idea of meaning.
Yes.
So I want to play the devil's advocate for a second and ask a question that might be rather on people's minds. So أنا دلوقتي I have secure attachment with a caregiver, and this is the person who passed away. ده معناه إنه our relationship had this sense of stability, safe context to it, and it's a strong relationship, and that sense this person is very fundamental to my sense of well-being. Wouldn't that be harder to make meaning out of and to deal with grief when it comes to that particular person?
That's true. It is harder. The research says it is harder. The loss is more traumatic in a sense. It does make it harder. That's what we do through therapy, for example, or what meaning reconstruction theory says. And what helps is realigning that attachment security into your life. So things that you loved about the person, things that made you feel safe and so on, being able to think about these things and doing activity. There's so many different tools like legacy boxes, gathering things that you love about this person that reminds you of the safety and security and so on that this person gave you in one place. Doing memories, rituals that align with what this person used to do. The idea is not completely detaching yourself from the person in their memory. It's actually living and remembering and doing things in their name. This can be very helpful in realigning and reconstructing.
Learn new ways to keep that person as part of your life.
And a big part of attachment theory is proximity. In this sense, there is no proximity. So there is no closeness to the person. But what there is your memories of that person. How you felt when you were around that person. Your experiences. That still exists. It's unknown.
So when you work with clients and the person who passed away again is a caregiver مثلا بس في الحالة دي they have more of an unhealthy relationship with that person. Let's say there was an avoidant pattern or can be resentment or anger or things that were left unsaid مثلا with that particular person who passed away. How do you deal with that in therapy? من غير ما the person gets stuck in that cycle of anger وكده وفي نفس الوقت how do you allow them to process these feelings when the person is no longer there?
This is a very interesting question, and because it's a very tough situation to be in, and it's tough when you're coming to support this person. Okay, let's talk about the therapy list for a second, and then go into therapy. When we meet with a person who's grieving, okay, and they've been struggling for a while, typically we call it or I hope you're doing. How can I help you? So the person is thinking about this individual, and it's on their mind the whole time. Actually, sometimes what they want to talk about is the person, the relationship with the person. The second we avoid this kind of conversation, very tough. It's not really because we don't know what to ask, it's because we're afraid of the conversation that's going to follow. We're afraid we won't be able to hold space. In therapy, what we do is hold space for it. Just hold space for the resentment, hold space for all the difficult conversations, hold space for the anger, allow the shame. Sometimes there's extreme shame, and I had a client who came feeling a lot of guilt over how the relationship ended. over what she was going through in the past last months before the relationship ended. And that was the whole, all we worked on was that shame. Like such deep shame and such hatred for herself, for how it ended, and how she could have done better, she could have, and so on. This is something. Someone else can come with the struggle of, they should have loved me better. I lost this person and they didn't give me what I should have been given while they were here. Lots of people have had amazing relationships. They actually miss the person. I don't miss them. And these are very harsh realities that are hard to say out loud. And they're going to be actually allowed to be said. And this law are very, very reaffirming.
And غير انه you hold the space for these kinds of emotions, which is huge. I don't want to minimize the significance of that, because this is not something you find in other relationships. صعب قوي ان الواحد يقول حاجه زي كده واللي قدامه يستوعب ويفهم انه this is something that's okay for some people to feel. والناس عاده لما بتقول حاجه they feel guilty afterwards. هو انا بقول كده عشان انا حاسس كده، بس في نفس الوقت this person is no longer there and it's not easy to say these things about them. How else in therapy مثلا if you can give an example of how can you برضو maneuver الحته دي؟
Okay. I think it's all about the relationship between the therapist and the client. The holding space, the reaffirming, the allowing it to be said, and allowing the consequence of what was said to exist. Okay. But through, when we're talking about attachments, what we do as therapists is try to provide that secure attachment. We're trying to provide that sense of, okay, I'm going to hear you, I'm going to listen to you, I'm not going to go away, I'm not going to think of you. I'm still here, I'm still listening. And what you're feeling is actually understandable and normal. This idea of just allowing it to exist. The second step is the idea of coping. Providing them with better coping mechanisms, providing them with the ability to reach out to a support system, to usually, like, if you're talking about avoidant attachment, اللي بيحصل ان they avoid reaching out to people. Okay, so this makes it harder. My research found an avoidant attachment was correlated higher with higher grief intensity. The more avoidant attachment you are, the higher your grief. Okay. And while anxious, surprisingly, didn't have a correlation with grief intensity. But both of these factors had a correlation with meaning making. So insecure attachment struggled more with meaning making. Because when it came to grief itself and the feelings of yearning, of struggling, was correlated more with avoidant attachment.
That's very interesting. وأوقات كمان avoidant attachment في الحتة دي بالذات في الحاجات اللي فيها very challenging experiences and having to show a lot of vulnerability in that sense. ممكن that person أصلا does not go to therapy. In a lot of cases هيبقى الحاجات دي موجودة بس these emotions are suppressed. فمش بروح للثيرابيست أصلا أو مش بسيك support زي ما كنت بتقولي.
If we talk culturally, we have so many rituals that happen after someone is abused someone. If someone is avoidant and they have to be put into these rituals and they have to be present, it can be even 10 times harder. Because everyone is asking me how you're doing, everyone is there, everyone is waiting for some type of reaction from me. I feel like the cameras are on me. It can be very tough to be able to connect. But you feel even more like you have to separate yourself.
So you can get into the bubble because I'll be high functioning of different things, I guess. If we take this on a daily life level أكتر مش بس in therapy, كلنا بنتعامل مع grief in different ways. زي ما انت بتقولي this is not just the loss of a loved one. كمان it includes a lot of other types of grief and loss. بس حتى لو أنا أعرف حد بيعدي experience فيها grief أو فقد, how can we be supportive of people around us while taking into consideration التقليد؟ يعني احنا عندنا different needs, different patterns, مش كل الناس بتتصرف أو بتكوب بنفس الطريقة. how can I show up to someone؟ عشان دي conversations عامة صعبة قوي على الناس to have in general.
I love this question. I think it's so important. A lot of times what we do is we send a message, we say, we give a call, and we hope that we're doing what we can do. Okay. The idea is everyone is unique and everyone has different needs. But sometimes the main thing is just asking, how can I help you? Okay. And also just being there. And you're not waiting for someone who doesn't really know how they can be helped. Okay? If we're talking especially about insecure attachments, and they don't, at this point, they might not know what I need. And I can't tell you how what I need, and I'm struggling. I'm not in this conversation, and I tell you I need this. But sometimes just being present, checking in on them, bringing them food, doing the typical things that we do here, which I think is great. Yeah, we have some communal, some communal rituals that really are beneficial and they help people. Okay. That's essentially it. I also want to add, and a big part of it, Kaman, is just, it's not just being there, but it's being there after a certain amount of time. Usually we're there in the first, right away. Okay, the first week.
When everyone is there.
But it's about, okay, so 5 months later, who's there? 6 months later, who's
the
there?
week later, who's there?
Who's there? Some people say, no, they don't like to be asked about the person who passed away, which makes a lot of sense. But research shows that actually people want to talk about the person who passed away, their memories and so on. A big part of it is not just asking, how can I help you? It's, can you tell me more about the person? How is your relationship with them? Not in a therapeutic sense. So, you know what? What's something you love doing with that person? Let's go do it together. What's a place that they love doing? What's a restaurant they love visiting? Let me take you there. Let me get you something that I know this person loved. These things can really help with continuing bonds area. Because once again, if we go back to attachment theory, there is the proximity isn't there, but the memories is still there. But you're trying to also bring it to if you wish, into the
cherish the memory, not make them feel like خلاص they're no longer part of life in that sense. بفكر كمان في spirituality when we're talking about coping أو حتى rituals that we have in our culture كتير منهم بيبقى ليه علاقة ب spirituality or religion, however you want to يعني perception هنا هتبقى and I find it's one of the areas that have a lot of complexity شوية عشان some people would resort to becoming more spiritual هدعي أكتر هصلي أكتر هعمل حاجات كده أكتر وفي ناس ممكن بالعكس يبقى عندها a lot of anger towards God مثلا أو تبقى عندها resentment. How do you see that?
Okay, that was a very, very interesting question. This one's a tough one. In the case of the برضه بيرجعنا لحتة meaning reconstruction. My existing meaning structures shattered, moved, and I'm struggling to realign that. Once again, it's about the narrative we're going to create. And how do I make sense of this shift? Even if it comes towards, okay, I'm struggling in my relationship with God. And I have a feeling that what I believed in, I don't essentially believe in anymore. Which can be very hard to deal with by itself. It's giving a space for that to happen. These are all processes that need to happen. That's the idea. The whole idea is we don't want to go the other way. Is allowing the conversation to happen in itself is big. Spirituality and I think one of the issues maybe if we're talking about culture is that everything goes back to spirituality. Everything goes back to religion. So if someone isn't religious in a sense or it doesn't connect the loss with God and they're in a better place with how do they cope? What do they do? There are a multitude of other coping mechanisms that are outside of religion. And this is where narrative making and meaning making comes in. Okay? It can be meaning through religion. It can be meaning through making sense of the life the person lived. Not just the after death and after. It's the before. What did they do in their life? What kind of legacy do they have? A huge part of one of the theories is something called legacy building. Okay? It's like understanding the legacy this person left behind and how can I continue. That could be the meaning in itself. I need to continue this. I need to spread the kindness that they spread. I need to live in the way they lived. Or I need to not do that. If it wasn't a good relationship, it was a bad relationship, I need to be better for my kids. I need to do these kind of things. And this is the change, this is the benefit I'm finding from this aspect. Linking all the things together.
Yeah, it's very interesting. بفكر كمان في مثلا concept حاجة زي صدقة جارية أو حاجات اللي هو very common إنها تتعمل after someone passes away. غير إنه it's for the person in some aspect of it, بس في حتة بتاعت إنه this is how I'm also finding meaning and I'm continuing something in the name of that person, so I'm keeping them alive in a way that way.
I'm guessing this is a big link to continuing bonds. A family member, 10 years on, we're still the anniversary of their death, we're still gathering together, we're still talking about them, we're talking about the memories, we're looking through pictures. These are all great things. I consulted with a mother who recently lost her husband, okay, and she didn't know how to tell her kids. Okay, and she was thinking, actually, let me remove everything in the house, let me change things around, let me change actually the house first. She was thinking of moving. and the idea of actually changing this narrative and being like, what if you do exactly the opposite? What if you keep things as is? You talk about the person more. You talk about who they are. You help them have this memory of them that's secure. That's wonderful. That they can move on and think about in the future, not completely avoid memories of the person.
That's very interesting. I can imagine that this can be very difficult, especially if the relationship with the person was complicated. بس عاد ده complicated grieving process أكتر لأنه again there are things that are left unsaid and now I don't know what to do with all this guilt and sadness بس في نفس الوقت relief maybe يعني ساعات بتبقى حاجات complicated أوي.
Grief is such a tough emotion. It's a very, very tough experience. And we're talking about something that's really not easy in any way.
Yeah.
And you really go through a whole identity reconstruction, a whole sense making that's requires a lot of effort, a lot of processing, a lot of time. It requires so much. Yeah. Giving the space for that is just so important. That's essentially it.
وانت تتكلمي كمان على فكرة identity reconstruction بفكر في example conversation that I once had with someone a friend of mine وغيرت قوي وجهة نظري في حاجات كتيرة قوي ليها علاقة بالgrief لأنه it was a question I never even thought about قبل كده. هي she lost a daughter. She had several kids and she lost one of her daughters. ودي واحدة من conversations الثقيلة يعني هو to have a conversation with someone and then not know whether to bring up the daughter ولا لا. زي ما انت بتقولي do you bring up the person because you want them to feel إنه you see the pain and you want them to still feel إنه they can still talk about the child who's lost ولا لا دي حاجة ما نفتحهاش ولا هي قادرة ولا مش قادرة. ده موضوع. A question بقى that she brought up وخلاني أفكر قوي إنه أنا عمري ما خدت بالي حتى إن دي ممكن تبقى حاجة that she struggled with. كانت بتقولي إن one of her biggest struggles لما بتيجي introduce herself للناس فهي كأم يعني سهل قوي إن كأم تتسألي أنت عندك كم طفل؟ عند ولادك عندهم كم سنة؟ ف does she bring up the daughter اللي she lost ولا لا؟ هي المفروض دلوقتي تبقى بتتكلم على أساس إنه her kids who are still there ولا المفروض تعد كمان معاهم the child who's lost and هل ده بيفتح conversations إن هي لازم تقول how she passed away ولا لا أو ده برضو قد إيه relationship دي قريبة ولا لا. فقصدي حاجة سؤال زي ده يعني مع إن أنا كنت حاسة إنه أنا أكيد حاسة هي موضوع كبير قوي بالنسبة لها بس I didn't think about that detail قد إيه ممكن ده يبقى حاجة it's the biggest struggle بالنسبة لها إنه أنا introduce نفسي إزاي. I mean there are things that have to do with our own identity when it comes to loss. I think sometimes we don't even think about it. بنبقى حاسين إن إحنا ممكن نبقى فاهمين بس we don't know the extent of it.
I'm guessing identity reconstruction is a huge one. It's like how do I make sense of my identity after that? The story you were just saying reminds me of برضو someone who lost their fiance right before they got married. One of her fiance's friends introduced her as that's my friend's wife. Okay. Even though they didn't get married yet, and that made her feel so good. Because this is comment of what could have been. This is the loss of what could have been and actually puts it to reality. You know, I was going to be his wife. I am his wife. This kind of, it really depends on the person, what they do in the end and how they share it, especially because of the consequences of sharing. But if you're not ready for certain questions and certain explanations, then I would recommend not getting into that. But if you feel like you're ready and you want to talk about the person, don't be afraid to. Hey, this is the aspect. Lots of people might react strongly, and this is the issue. But according to linear reconstruction theory, according to modern grief theories, it's important to talk about the person and have them a part of your reality.
وانت بتقولي كمان فكرة what could have been بيفكرني بمثلا people who are going through loss related to miscarriages. ودي حاجة احنا مش بنتكلم فيها كتير خالص في الكالتشر بتاعتنا و different cultures عامة. this idea of what could have been. فأنا I lost حاجة not in the past بس more so حاجة in the future حاجة كانت هتحصل فأنا بفضل عايشة with the implications of that. فالناس بتعدي باليوم اللي كان المفروض هيبقى due date اليوم اللي كان المفروض الطفل ده هيتم فيه سنة أو كذا أو ده كان هيبقى milestone الفلانية وحاجة ممكن الناس تفضل عايشة بيها سنين ومحدش عارف إنه ده أصلا حاجة موجودة أو this is what they're going through.
Even some people don't even say that they were pregnant.
أصلا.
It was not never even a reality to anyone.
فصعب إنك to share أصلا a miscarriage if you didn't share the news of pregnancy.
This عامة is all تحت الأمبريلا بتاع ambiguous loss.
ده كان هيبقى النقطة اللي جاية لها. Please go ahead.
So there's different types of losses and different types of grief عامة. منهم disenfranchised grief, grief that you're not able to talk about. I think actually miscarriage can fall underneath this sometimes. To explain more disenfranchised, it's basically دلوقتي let's say someone committed suicide. Okay? And in a culture where it's not open enough to the experience of that person and how they were struggling mentally and so on. I'm not able to talk about the grief in a specific way. But this is a whole struggle in itself. Okay? But someone I miscarried, anything that's related to I can't actually speak.
I have to keep it completely quiet.
Yes.
So you won't do this alone.
Yes. But that's a whole other big struggle. And this impacts the ability to make meaning and the ability to reconstruct my narrative. Well, the idea of narrative is the way I say the story. Okay? The way I say the story, including how I see myself in it. Okay? But this ability to do this narrative can be very hard to do if I'm not talking, if I'm not processing. Okay?
For the ambiguous losses برضه ممكن نتكلم على فكرة إنه حد موجود because sometimes you lose a person and they're still there. زي مثلا in cases of dementia مثلا أو حاجات similar to that اللي هو the person is there physically بس you feel that أولا you're anticipating في anticipated grief هنا موجود بالظبط. فهو مش grief على حاجة حصلت بس أنا in anticipation of a loss or deterioration حتى but the person is there physically but emotionally I'm no longer connected to them. How do people deal with that? بالذات لو ده كمان attached to physical.
One of the biggest things is actually being able to name it. Sometimes people don't really understand what they're going through. أنا متضايقة طول الوقت أنا متعصبة من كل الناس أنا مش عارفة have relationships I am isolating myself أنا مش طايقة حد and when we come and tell them this is grief you're grieving they're like wait I'm going just that لوحدها and being able to label what they're going through it's huge. It can be very very beneficial for a person to just understand because in the end you're not trying to stop it. You can't stop it. Okay? It exists. It's a harsh reality. It exists. But what you can do is be able to align with it, recognize what you're going through, and that headed acceptance and commitment, and being able to recognize that this is happening, why it's happening. Very recently, there's a lot of quotes that come out. I don't know how. Actually, for some people, it's very beneficial. It's the idea of a grief is love that has no place to go. This has I've seen so many comments and so many reflections about how impactful this quote
when you reframe it
yes.
into as much as you love the person the grief that also comes with the losses
being able to understand how I have so much love and so much to give this person and I gave them so much and what do I do with this now just being able to recognize that by itself.
وفي البروسيس of grief في theories بتتكلم على stages وفي لا بس عامة لو بنتكلم simple language when it comes to that كل حد قاعد هنا ممكن يبقى grieving حاجة أو again it might be the loss of a loved one أو أي حاجة تانية. هل ممكن in the process of grief we feel better وابتدي align على حاجات و make meaning و adapting and coping وارجع تاني للسكوير 1 وارجع يعني هل ده حاجة عادية هل this is common?
Yes, it's very common. I would actually rephrase it to not saying you're going back to square one. But it's a path, okay? And sometimes certain emotions pop up again. A memory, you see something, and it brings back all those emotions. For example, I think you actually told us this in class, Mara, the idea of the ball okay, a circle and there's a mini circle inside it and there's a red button. Okay, what grief is basically is the circle is moving around and sometimes it hits this red button. Okay, and this is you're just living life normally and then suddenly it hits the red button and all of the emotions come crashing down. But that, in the sense of these emotions are normal, they're part of the grieving process and they're part of you remembering this person, and allowing it to happen is not trying to avoid it. Is part of it.
وin your research عامة الحاجات اللي انت قريتيها على grief was there وبالذات في الكالتشر بتاعتنا was there anything that you surprised you أو حسيتي إنه إيه ده أنا كنت فاكرة دي حاجة ليها علاقة بالgrief أو يمكن attachment بيأثر على grief in that way and it wasn't?
أنا for me it was anxious attachment. A big part of this I was like, why is it not correlated with grief intensity? Why do those who have anxious attachment don't have higher grief? Even though research actually in the past highlights this relation. The way I understood it was through a cultural lens. The concept of, okay, research says that those with anxious attachment, if they receive support, they are able to function better. Okay? A big part of being anxious is you look for support actually. You do actually look for it and you try to get it, but sometimes it's clinging on and sometimes it's not being able to move forward and it's being worried that you're going to lose the other person. Okay, but there's always this concern. But the idea is, the way I understood it is most of my participants were saying that they did receive support, so some sort of support. Okay, actually most of them ranked their support quite high, which might be relative to our culture and how we grieve in a community. This just highlights the importance of support. Okay, whatever that support can look like, whatever it is, reaching out to it and having it is essential. To be able to do everything, because we just talked about how everything is super hard, and I'm not giving solutions of how to lessen it or how to, I'm actually saying it has to exist. To be able to give space for this, you need to have support alongside. But this is essentially it.
بالذات لما نتكلم على social support بحس انه مهم قوي انه السبورت يبقى شبه اللي الشخص محتاجه والperception بتاعته هو of support، عشان زي ما احنا كنا بنقول من شويه ممكن my perception of support انا هكلمك كل يوم او انا هجيلك في البيت كل يوم او انا هعمل لك اكل او انا whatever هشيل عنك حاجات او كده، بس ممكن اللي انت محتاجاه حاجه ثانيه. انت مثلا في وقت فعلا محتاجه تبقي لوحدك او في وقت محتاجه حد يبقى بيسبورت you in a different way. فعلى قد ما in our culture this idea of social support is very prevalent. بسمع كتير قوي برضه من الناس بتقول انه في 100 حد حواليا بس I really feel alone او I feel انه انا محتاج حاجه مختلفه او الكواليتي اوف presence بتاعت الناس انا مش عايزها تبقى عامله كده او مش عايزه الناس اللي حواليا مثلا تقعد تقولي حاجات زي ده خير وانت ما ينفعش تعيط، ولما ساعات بنربطها بتزين شويه ونبتدي ندوس some guilt ان انت لو حاسس كذا يبقى انت مش راضي، لو انت مش عارفه بتعيط يبقى انت مش اوكي مع اللي بيحصل and so on. فساعات السبورت ده بيبقى فيه سنة burden in my opinion، بس as long as it's يعني trying as much as possible to meet what the person needs, I think it's definitely حاجة مهمة قوي in our culture.
Despite most of the participants saying that they received support, and عندنا avoid attachment that was linked to grief intensity. It's exactly that. Not everyone reacts to support the same. The whole idea about grief and this whole experience, it's very unique. It's very personal. It's impacted by personal, social, cultural factors. There's so many factors at play. عشان كده when we talk about the interrelation between grief, meaning making, and attachment, and why it's so important to study these things together, it's because of how this kind of looks at the person from every angle. But we're not looking at one specific angle because it's really crucial. And what we say is in therapy, you have to consider these angles. You have to look at their attachment. You have to look at their own resilience, their personal factors, how they look at social support. How does this person look at all these factors?
قبل ما نموف للأسئلة from the audience, and I do realize and I want to acknowledge and النهارده the topic is يعني it can be heavy and it can be heavy on some people more than others, and يعني كده يعني كله عارف التوبيك قبل ما يجي، فأنا عارفة إنه مش الديسكليمر ده كده موجود، بس قصدي يعني I want to acknowledge إنه يعني كلنا محتاجين نفس كده عميق and to really feel how this sinks in كل حد فينا، يعني كل الحاجات دي بتريزونيت ازاي. بس if there is one thing that you would say to everyone who's in the room النهارده that you feel can be helpful during grief عامة، لو هما they're going through grief أو لو بيساعدوا حد who's also going through grief. Can you say something about that?
Yes, of course. Okay. Thank you all for being here. I know this is a very tough topic, Alan. I appreciate you being here and wanting to learn about it and wanting to be able to support other people or even support yourself. Thank you. Tani Haga, I do want to mention something very important. Is the first thing we're talking about grief on method. If we look at the basics of the first thing, usually most of us are learned is the stages of grief. People go through anger, through the specific way people grieve. This is the most common way of learning about grief. What I want to say right now is that there is other theories that look at grief differently. Yes, these emotions do happen during the grieving process, but there is no time. There is no specific stage for each thing. There is no specific time, I'm supposed to stop this at this time. And if I'm not at the acceptance by a year, يبقى أنا كده دخلت في complicated grief. The DSM says that the complicated grief, which is the most intense type of grieving, happens after a year. I think that's crazy. I think that's essentially crazy because after a year, you're still in the processing zone. Basically, there is no time. And understanding that and not linking time with how you're supposed to be grieving or how others are supposed to be grieving is huge. So then you're able to support them in a different way. You understand and know even after a specific amount of time, they can still be experiencing very, very tough emotions. They can still be struggling a lot. Essentially, and my research actually supported this also. Found in the time since loss had no impact and no correlation with anything, which was a big surprise of its way. Like I thought, I was studying 3 years, 1 to 3 years. I thought, okay, a kid 3 years, mungkin they're experiencing things a bit less. It was no different. Okay, I was like, okay, interesting, and I was like, yes, at the same time, because this proves my own concepts towards grief, and actually a lot of modern grief theories that are looking towards the aspect of time not being that's important. The one thing I can say is give it time, understand in a lot of time is in the grief process. And that's essentially it.
بس follow up على ده بما ان احنا بنتكلم على experience كده it's tough وكده it's challenging. The different بقى levels of intensity وكده مفهوم. بس في الاخر it is a tough experience وممكن تطول والحاجات دي كلها هنقولها. It has a lot of emotions وبتطلع وتنزل وحاجات كده. How then would you define healthy grief?
Okay. Okay. If healthy grief to me is related to how it's related to support system. Okay. Do I have a support system in place? Am I allowed to feel all these really extremely tough emotions while feeling safe as I'm feeling them? Okay. These are two aspects I would say. Okay. Kida, we can process these tough emotions and try and realign our narrative in a healthier way. But I think also the idea of healthy grief can be very negative to say in a sense, because okay, what if I don't have a support system? What if I'm not? Does that mean I'm grieving wrong? Okay. But there's no wrong or right. The idea of healthy grief is whatever works for you. Okay, if we were to essentially say it down to the point, it's a unique experience. You would experience it very differently than another person. You can be two people who lost the same exact person and you're grieving differently. You have the same upbringing, same everything, and you're grieving differently. And that's what, essentially that's okay.
Yes. I love that. Questions?
First of all, thank you so much for the event and for your words and conversation and very smart answers and questions. Okay, most of the time we were talking about how we can support other people going through grief. Okay, what about us? What about us going through grief? What should we say to ourselves? Especially that with anxious attachment, you're always looking for reassurance. You're going to people looking for assurance. But okay, this is a kind of support. You can support people with reassuring them. But at some time, ده برضه حاجة it's not healthy for the anxious attachment. هو دايما معتمد على reassurance from other people. ده هيزود الdependency بتاعته إن هو مستني reassurance from other people. So what we should say to ourselves through going through this kind of grief, خاصة إن هو مثلا through going to rage. إن هو seeing the people that hurt you in some way, they are having a wonderful life, they are enjoying in life. وإنتي you are going through so much pain and so much discomfort. يعني برضه دي حتة اللي هو spirituality، إن هو أنت تحس إن هو طب ليه يا رب يعني في الكارما مش شغالة ليه؟ إن هو they are having their life, enjoying their life, they don't even feel guilt for hurting you. This is
I would answer this one. I would have a great question, very important. I would say, and the important thing is actually the way if you have the initial thought is هم ليه مبسوطين هم ليه هو ايه اللي بيحصل ده ومفيش كارما ومفيش ايه وربنا كل الأسئلة دي if the reaction to that thought is shame, is why am I thinking this way? I shouldn't be thinking this way. This is what I would be working on. Okay, it's the reaction to the initial thought. These thoughts are completely normal. Okay, and this is normalizing the grief experience. It's normal to feel very upset when other people are having fun. It's normal to look at the relationship that you lost and seeing other people have that relationship and being like, well, why? Why do people get to live long with their parents and live this and I don't? This is normal, and I will be working on the reaction, the shame, the guilt, the extreme disappointment in not being able to breathe in the healthy way that people say is healthy. This would be my answer. I don't know if I answered your question.
Okay, what about what you should say to yourself through this process of grief? What you can do to yourself, say to yourself?
Okay, I'll answer it in two different ways. What you say to yourself and what you can do. Okay, what you can say to yourself is what I just said, the normalizing the experience. Well, this is normal. I'll allow myself to feel this way. I understand where this is coming from. I understand that I'm grieving. Okay, but this is something you can say to yourself. What you can do is there's so many different tools and so many things we sometimes tell clients to do. Part of it is continuing rituals that you did with the person, building the legacy box, so the idea of having this memories of the person in one place that you're able to reach out to, keeping their memory alive, talking about them to close people, writing about them. One of the techniques that really popular grief researcher, his name is David Kessler, he says write letters to the person, engage in this communication with the person as you go through the process. What you say to yourself is normalizing the experience and recognizing that it's normal, it's coming from somewhere. You're not a bad person for thinking this way. That's essentially it.
ديفيد كاستر عنده كتاب حلو قوي اسمه Finding Meaning ولا اسمه ايه؟
اسمه Finding Meaning.
It's a really good book. Anyone wants to
I
read about
really recommend it. He's adding basically a stage to it, like the whole stages of grief. He's saying that in the end there's one stage and it's called Finding Meaning. Okay, so this is basically everything we just talked about is in that aspect.
So country speaking بقى هنا we look at grief as get over it, not live with it, or grow out of it, not grow with it. How do you draw the line in that, or how do you decide when to tell this to a client, for example? عشان sometimes telling this to a client means you're acknowledging, telling them you're making it clear that they lost something. I read something before certain attachment styles, it's better for them to actually get over it, not live with it. When you tell them live with it, when do you decide to do that? Especially that sometimes لو حد بقى within مثلا ممكن هو this is how they are coping, how they are growing out of it. But telling them to live with it is actually making them acknowledge and be aware that they actually lost something.
Okay, there's so many different angles we can look at this. I don't think I would ever say live with it or get over it. I mean, both aspects I wouldn't mention anyway. The idea is there's no getting over it. Okay, if we talk about the psychoanalysis theory and decapexis, it's the essence of I can be moving forward in a specific way and not thinking about the person every day and being okay with that. The idea of realigning your current narrative and having the memories of the person and being able to also enjoy new things in life. It's the way we reframe things when we think about things. It's not getting over. I'm not sitting, and this can come with guilt. Why do I not feel sad? Why am I not crying every day anymore? Why am I able to? I'm laughing. I was reading this book and I was talking about the first time they laughed after losing someone. And it's like a moment of I just had fun. I just experienced something positive, and being able to also recognize that this is part of the process.
The and هنا بحس ان هي it really adds a lot of value. فكرة انه I can be grieving and I'm excited about certain things in life. I can be sad and I'm happy about certain things. And the and having different things happen at the same time is very important. احنا بنحس ساعات انه لو انا I'm grieving انا بس I'm grieving. او انا I'm happy يبقى انا بس I'm happy. But we're a lot more complicated than that, and usually الحاجات ما بتبقاش standalone. There's an example I usually give in my classroom برضه about grief انه لو دخلنا الأوضة دي النهارده وكل حاجة كانت متشالة، مفيش الكمبيوترز مش موجودة، الديسكس، الكراسي، مفيش أي حاجة خالص، مفيش حاجة على الحيطة، مفيش حاجة هنا، nothing except one big table in the middle. This is all you can see when you go in because it's the only thing there right now. بس with time لو افترضنا احنا مش هنشيل الترابيزة هي هتفضل موجودة، بس هنحط كراسي حواليها وهنحط شوية كتب وهنحط فازة عليها الورق وهيبقى في كمبيوترز وهيبقى هنا في صورة وحاجات على الحيطة. It didn't delete الحاجة من اللي هي مش موجودة. It's still there and you can still see it. بس probably عينك مش رايحة عليها 100% of the time زي في الأول بعد كده هيبتدي your attention goes to other things in life as well. So life is happening around it. بس live with it أو كده is more of يعني I wouldn't also say these things. Because you don't need to live, once كده you're living with it. So when you tell someone live with it, again, they have to do something so that they start living with it. فاهمة قصدي؟ It's not really what's happening. Other questions? Yes.
It's related to the first question. يعني مثلا if you had a good relationship with someone and then مثلا there was a fallout and there was a grieving process and the person is still alive and like you don't remember this person in a positive light. To what extent do the coping mechanisms differ than if you had a positive memory of this person? Because for example, you wouldn't want to keep like the memory alive or remember the memories of the person that you're grieving when the perception is negative.
I think this word goes back to what you were just saying, the and aspect. I can grieve someone and also feel disappointed towards them and also have horrible experiences with them and they hardly come in certain ways. Like I can have that happen. But the idea of being able to recognize this dichotomy and this interrelation and that it can happen at once is part of it. When we're talking about coping, I feel like I have to say, you can do this activity, you can chat. Part of coping is just accepting that this can happen. Accepting that this idea, and this is part of ambiguous loss, by the way. You know, there's someone who's physically there but not psychologically present, relax, psychologically present but not physically there. How do I make sense of this big opposites by recognizing that they can happen at once? Essentially, that's it.
I found this very, very interesting. Thank you so much. I do not have any knowledge of grief literature, so I might ask a very good question, but you said this one phrase that I wrote down, grief is love that has no place to go. And it made me think of clinical experience when working with people who have severe mental problems and who are in psychiatry. And actually, I wondered if we could replace this also by grief we talked a lot about guilt. And what I see in clinical work is that this guilt, actually this is where I agree with Freud, because I know there's modern theories, but I agree with Freud when he says that this guilt in the grief sticks with the person. The person doesn't manage to invest it in a different object or a person, and this tortures them. And you hear that when someone who has a psychotic disease, for example, would tell you, I feel so guilty, I think I killed him. And they have nothing to do with the death of the person. And this for me is very interesting, and I wonder if you see this with people who do not have these impactful illness. Is this something that you see all the time, or that sometimes is not even there? Is this something that in the literature maybe is also described in modern literature? I don't know anything about this.
This is such a good question. Actually, I agree with you in the part of Freud. This is also the only aspect I agree with.
Nice.
The essence of it, what he's talking about is, okay, detachment, because you're putting all of this emotional toll and all of this energy into one thing, but you need to put it elsewhere. That's what he's saying. We agree and disagree with aspects of it. But I do agree that when you have a lot of guilt or you have a lot of shame and you're putting it and you don't have, it has nowhere to go, but you have to figure out where to put it and where to take it, and this is where coping mechanisms come in. It's reminding me of the client I was talking about who came she had horrible experiences with someone before they passed away, and she felt like she was the cause. She was too tough, too not understanding, she should have been more helpful, and so on. And she's like, she told me once that she felt like she made it escalate, made the person was sick, she made them more sick. Okay. This is very hard to hear and very hard to say. Okay? It's a very, very hard thing for someone to assess and acknowledge that they feel this way. Part of it is, once again, being that safe person, being that secure. Like Anna, in therapy, I'm the one that's listening to these things. I have to be receptive, being able to listen to them and have them exist in the room, have these thoughts exist. And how we deal with them is talk them through, is build a new narrative, build a new way of looking at it, is recognizing the person was sick. How did you make them more sick? Talk about it in very logical terms, okay, while also recognizing the emotional capacity behind it. It's building a new narrative, basically.
But you also experience people who don't have guilt at all. The feeling of guilt is not attached to loss, or do you think it's a general experience in loss experiences?
I do see a lot of guilt come with loss. It's very, it comes a lot. طبعا also guilt comes with not, especially if we're talking about the person is still there. The ambiguous loss comes with also a lot of guilt. They do exist a lot together.
This is not fully a question, it's also a thought, and I'd love to hear both of your opinions on it. As you guys were talking, I also can't help but think that when we talk about meaning making, there is the aspect of meaning making related to the loss. I lost someone, how am I thinking of them now? How am I trying to keep their legacy going? All of that stuff. And there's the other part of, I think, grief and death, especially not that was ambiguous, but especially when it comes to grief associated with someone passing away, that I feel like it's you facing your own mortality in some way of like, we live our lives, I think a lot of the time not really recognizing that we're all mortal at the end of the day and we're all going to pass them. So I feel like a big part of what comes with this grief is also meaning making associated with yourself. And I'm curious as to if you guys have anything to add there in terms of attachment and all that background and what you do with that experience in terms of your own life, in terms of how different people may experience that as عايش بقية حياتي, I'm trying to do things differently and I want to make more meaning out of my life and I want to do something with that versus مثلا someone who loses someone and they're like, oh خلاص ما, we're all gonna die, so what's the point? It's different ways of making sense of your own life based on how you're making sense of the loss. This is عامة, I thought that came to mind. I don't know if you guys have any insight into how they may be interconnected. It was something I was thinking about around.
Honestly, something about this actually, and follow up on Laura's comment as well, especially with guilt, and then I'll come to your question as well. Guilt, I feel, has to do with our illusion of control. As human beings, we have this illusion and we can control things. So when loss happens sometimes, and it really doesn't make sense at times, we try to make sense of it in ways that we can understand. But I can understand cause and effect stuff. A caused B. This made that happen. By me not doing this, I escalated the situation and so on. And I feel that sometimes having that sense of meaning is easier for people than not having meaning at all. Things not making sense is more scary than it's me. I have to do I'm guilty. I have to do with it somehow. But I feel like this sometimes adds to the guilt aspect, and I see it being very common with grief in general.
Like playing a role in the scenario.
Somehow. حتى if it's not in the loss itself, I should have been more sensitive to this person's needs. I should have called more. I should have seen them more. I should have whatever. Like as if what I did or didn't do had anything to do with it. This illusion of control again. And your question, Maya, reminds me of a book I'm currently reading. It's called Soul for Happy. I don't know if anyone knows Mo Gaudet. He was the executive director of Google X for several years, very, very big corporate man, very successful, and then he lost his son and shifted careers and wrote a book about the meaning of happiness and a million other things in the book. And the whole idea of the book for him is this idea of the legacy of his son living somehow through this book. But I see that happening in many ways. It can be very, very small things and very big acts as well to keep on the legacy of someone. And also it really sheds light on our own mortality. Some people like to think about it in that way, and some others, I would say, would completely يبصوا الناحية الثانية and not think about it at all. And these are different coping strategies we would do. Some people would be more invested in life because life is short and you know what, let's do whatever we need to do fast. And other people are going to be very indifferent about life as a result. It's all ending anyway, what's the point? I think it has to do with a lot of things. As long as we're aware of it and as long as we understand what's going on, it's fine. Hatta if we go into one of these paths, it's okay. Because sometimes we put pressure on people, they have to grieve properly. Again, going back to this idea, if you're not finding meaning right away, what are you doing? If you think that life has no purpose, it's okay, that's how I feel right now and that's fine. None of these paths would be an issue in and of itself, except if we're not aware of it and if it's, that's another issue.
You said it perfectly. I think this goes back to the idea of identity reconstruction. This is a huge part of the meaning making process. It's really just facing your identity and facing who you are in this life after this loss. It involves so many different aspects, like Dr. Noor was saying, questioning yourself, questioning your religion, questioning your purpose, questioning everything. It's an interesting part if we're adding research into this. And my research found that the older the person who passed away, the more the person is able to make meaning. Okay? So that can mean, I'm making meaning through the idea of, okay, this person lived a long life, they did these things, it made sense. Okay, but when a young person dies, someone exactly my age, someone who looks exactly like me and has lived the same life as me, it makes you question yourself. It's all part of the process.
Did you find anything about whether cause of death affects the way the person makes meaning?
For me, my research, nothing was actually the only thing that was prominent, because I didn't have enough participants who said that, was unknown cause of death. If you don't know what happened, then that makes the person struggle to find meaning. So I had very few participants, so I can't make any result out of this.
Lack of closure.
Yes, but there's lack of, which goes back to probably the ambiguous loss and the idea of I don't know what happened. I'm not able to build that narrative. That's one thing.
I sort of have a thought and a question. A thought in terms of like the day you lose someone, or maybe it's an ambiguous loss or whatnot, and it kind of your life stops as well. And sometimes you prolong stopping your life in a way. I don't know if it's about like wanting to stay with that person, as if losing my life as well. With that person, so you want to hold space to stay with that person for a longer time. Maybe that's a thought, and I wanted your opinion on that as well. And the question is, when you start reflecting and being aware and thinking that I feel stuck from that day, I want to move forward, grieve and move forward with my life. I start thinking about the rituals and start thinking about legacy making and all of that, but how could I see it inside myself, and how could I see the signs where I am, that this is good for me at that moment, or am I forcing it? Like, how do you do all of these elements without the element of forcefulness in a way? Like, you're forcing yourself to move forward.
I want to add to that before kind of answering or reflecting on it. And life, unfortunately, kind of forces you. The person, when they're grieving, this is one of the biggest concerns, is everything is moving forward and I'm not really able to. And then it comes to a point where I need to do a few things. I need to be able to financially, I need to move, I need to work, I need to do certain things. But I'm moving forward and I'm doing these behaviors because I feel so stuck. Okay. And the meaning reconstruction theory relates stuckness to not actively processing the meaning behind the death or the identity reconstruction and all of these aspects. You're not actively going through it. But the idea is you don't need to really do anything. There's no moving forward in a specific aspect or a specific behavior that you do that it classifies as I moved forward, or the idea is just giving yourself space. Again, everyone is so unique, everyone is so different. Some people need more time than others to go back to the life and go back to the daily activities. Because giving yourself that time is really important. That would be my only answer. I don't know if you
I'll
have
follow up on
anything.
something you were saying at the beginning of your question. هو if you feel stuck, or if you intentionally try to stop your life from moving forward, because that happens very frequently, and there are a couple of concepts that I'm thinking about. فكرة hidden loyalty, if anyone is familiar with this idea of hidden loyalties, أو survivor's guilt, or other theories, either or. This idea إنه I've lost someone, let's say مثلا a sibling who was younger, or someone that I unconsciously feel that the natural order of things wasn't done right, or إنه I should have been in their place, or let's say it was an accident, I turned out fine and someone else was hurt. حاجات اللي هي بالذات these types of situations, unconsciously people sometimes I wouldn't say sabotage their lives, but you get what I mean. They would intentionally, unconsciously, but kind of not want their lives to proceed in a certain way. لأن في this sense of guilt إنه بس how come I survived? How come I'm still living my life? How come مثلا this family member who was younger didn't is not with us now, but I get to do these things. So maybe I need to do something that would sabotage the experience for myself because I have this unconscious guilt related to it.
I can't feel happiness. I can't feel
I can't be
anything
happy,
because that means I'm not loyal to the
Mhm.
person that passed away. It's a tough experience. There's so many contexts to it. There's so much happening at once. Yeah.
Thank you very, very insightful conversation. عايزة أسأل about يعني أنا very interested in grief in relationships specifically. In terms of losing يعني ambiguous grief برضه in terms of losing a partner when the partner is still there whether بقى هم اتغيروا خالص أو حاجة حصلت بس حتى when the relationship is established قوي في marriage مثلا how do you يعني make meaning in a relation in a loss where you're grieving a partner, you're grieving your identity مثلا as a husband or as a wife, you're grieving البيت مثلا اللي احنا كنا عايشين فيه كل الكلام ده how do you يعني بحس ان الجريف ده بيبقى كبير قوي و it's so like يعني across كل or the parts of the person's life how do you يعني how do you tackle the grief ده وهو كبير قوي
I will say something that this is the most common type of grief I see with clients. Actually, it's not them losing someone; it's them losing a relationship and the person still being there. It's the most common thing I've seen, and they don't name it as grief usually. They don't realize this is grief. They don't realize that they're actively grieving someone and they're actively going through this process. But again, back to naming it and helping someone recognize that this is what they're going through, and that it's normal to miss all of these things, and it's normal to feel طب يا ريتني ما ارجع في relationship if it wasn't working out just so that I can continue having this sense of security because that's what it gave me. But what I'm losing is if we refer back to attachment, I'm losing the sense of security and safety I once had. How can I find the idea is to find things that give me that sense of security and safety once again and allow myself to process these really tough experiences and feelings and recognize that this is grief.
بحس ان هو grief of sense of security برضه grief of your identity بقى يعني لازم اغير حاجات كتير قوي فيها عشان اعرف adjust
بالظبط. It's very common برضه very common برضه لما الأمهات مثلا تخلف and then they grieve this previous version of themselves أو single life أو ولادهم كبروا دخلوا جامعة سافروا اتجوزوا this idea of again shifting identity طب أنا دلوقتي مين؟ Who am I if I'm not a mom in that sense أو yes, it's a very common type of grief.
I was going to add to that, but this is why a lot of people stay in certain relationships because they're trying to avoid this because it's tough.
Hello. I think I can speak for a lot of people who are practicing and who are involved in the cycle in some way. We are talking about the people we are helping, but what about the helpers?
مستنية السؤال ده
Yeah, so for me, I think حاجة أنا جاي I'm thinking about is vicarious grief. Because for me, I see a lot of people who experience grief in my practice مثلا. So I find myself living day-to-day life كده, carrying معايا the grief of more than one person, and there's no grief in my own life. I cannot imagine when I experience grief while carrying that grief. وفي الفيكاريوس grief بتاع مثلا for example people who have died from war and I'm watching social media وهكذا. So any insights on that? يعني how do I cope as a helper when it comes to grief? Because for me grief is so alien to me and الحمد لله ما people يعني probably gonna experience it anyway. بس يعني قصدي the idea of carrying other people's grief with you, whether it be friends or loved ones or clients or حتى other people you see in the heat. So how does that come into play?
You're reminding me earlier of something, I think it was David Kasper who said this. He was talking about how he was giving a lecture to about 200, 300 people who had lost a kid. Okay? No, it wasn't David Kasper because he did it. Someone else who was basically saying, well, I didn't lose a kid. I actually didn't experience what you guys experienced. I'm the one that's giving you this lecture on how to improve your life and how to be able to cope and But recognizing this that there's some sort of the experience is so tough that lots of people say that you can't understand it unless you experience it. And this is something very common. A lot of therapists are being told that. How are you helping someone when you haven't experienced this? But the other aspect is, okay, I have experienced this and I do know it, and what you're saying is bringing up a lot of memories in my own life, and which can also happen in so many different aspects in therapy. The coping is having the supervision, having the support, again back to support, being able to take time off if you need, if it's too close to home, referrals, is recognizing what you need and being upfront with yourself, and it's impacting you, and also recognizing that it's normal.
I just wanted to add to the previous question she asked. She كلمت عن مثلا someone that is still there.
Yes.
She said that sometimes they're not aware that they are grieving. I noticed that sometimes not being aware that you're grieving comes with that you're still hoping or waiting for this person to come back. So hope or just waiting or being hopeful that things will get better or they will come back. How do you think this affects the journey of grief? And how do you combine them together? You're not saying don't be hopeful, but at the same time you have to.
It goes back to the and situation. I can hope and I can grieve. They can exist at once. That's the idea of that. No, this is not a disruption to the grief process. This is not something I'm not supposed to be experiencing. This makes sense in the situation. I really hope that this person, let's say if we're talking about dementia, this happens a lot in the beginning phases of someone experiencing dementia. The other person's like, I really hope they get better. I can't accept anything else. The process is being able to put both together. Oh, I hope they get better. I hope this person returns back to my life. I hope I have a better relationship with this person, and I'm grieving them not being here. It's just them existing together. I don't know if I
بس بيفكرني شوية بحاجة it's a different context probably this is not what you're asking about بس بفكر ازاي families كتير بتبقى عايزة to shield their children from the idea of grief and loss. فمثلا a loved one will pass away, a grandparent or family member, family friend, whatever, and they would try to avoid explaining if this person passed away or this person is not coming back أو كده. فاحنا بنحاول نحميهم بإن احنا let's give them hope or leave that sense of hope. وده ساعات بيبقى مضر. يعني if in the grieving process for a child مثلا this can actually be very hurtful because the child keeps hoping for the person returning. كل ما هيفتح أنا maybe this is the person coming back, right? فبفكر إنه يعني أوقات this idea of hope if it's false hope ممكن تبقى برضه disrupting شوية للprocess وتطوله unnecessary يعني تبقى complicated the process شوية.
This بيخلي شوية resistance مش عايز
It's true. When we talk about in that context, it can have a negative impact on someone who have extreme false hope. And this comes in acceptance and commitment and recognizing what the relationship as it is now. And also, I'm really with the idea of normalizing even hope, even if it's false hope, recognizing where it comes from, recognizing what you're looking for. Is it the secure attachment? Is it that what is this feeling telling you? It's the essence of finding that.
كان عندي سؤال كمان. Obviously we all grieve يعني it's very natural. But is there research مثلا that says that which variables affect grief more than others? Like مثلا the depth of the relationship or the strength of the attachment or like how neurotic the person is in general, because I see it in so many different individuals manifesting differently. So is there a variable that on average makes people grieve more than others?
Yes. There's a bunch of variables. All you said, and also the degree of closeness. And in my research found that the closer the person was, the more they were grieving, and the more they were struggling with making meaning. The stronger the attachment bond, the greater the struggle, let's say. There's so many factors. The time, the relationship, how they passed away. Was it traumatic? Was it known? Was there anticipatory grief? What was happening? Your relationship with them, whether there was anything that was that you didn't talk through or didn't solve before the person passed away. All these factors can complicate the process. Yeah.
I'm finding my way of coping mechanism as being numb for years. with several traumas. But everybody around me is asking me, "Hani, is this normal? This is not normal." This is a relief for me from away from being anxious, nervous, angry, crying a long time ago. Is this fun? I've been to therapy for years. Okay. This is fine for me, giving me a stable home. But it's numbing everything. Happiness and sadness. It's nothing is frightening me anymore. I find it a relief. Is this okay? But my kids and my husband, everybody's telling me, what is this?
This is the idea that we were talking about من شوية فكرة healthy ومش healthy, normal مش normal. Would you like to say something?
Yeah, I was going to actually point towards this, that every person is very unique, and how they process grief and how they process traumas and so on is unique to them. The point where I would want to dig deeper in or to think about is the idea of not experiencing also any happiness, not experiencing any positive emotions, not being able to enjoy aspects of your life. This is where I would be digging deeper into and putting some question marks on. The idea of being numb, while it is very beneficial, okay, it's very helpful, it's helping you, like you're saying, it also has that aspect. Well, also you don't get to experience positive aspects in life. This is what I would bring up, or I would highlight.
The idea of being numb عامة زي ما سلمى بتقول it has a lot of benefits. To be honest, فكرة إن أنا بالذات لو مثلا I'm carrying heavy things، لو أخدناها إن أنا عندي شنطة تقيلة بمشي بيها على طول، مش شرط إن أنا دايما قادرة أمشي بيها على طول، مش شرط إن أنا دايما قادرة أتكلم في الحاجات دي، أدخل في الدبث بتاعها، أفكر فيها حتى مع نفسي. فممكن ساعتها ابقى حاسه انه انا مش عايزه افكر في ده، عايزه اعيش حياتي عامه من غير ما ابص على حاجات معينه صعبه ممكن اكون عديت بيها. بس السؤال بيكون هل انا عندي حتى لو شخص واحد ممكن انزل الشنطه دي على الارض واوقات اقول له على فكره this is too much، على فكره انا اصلا تعبانه، على فكره انا this is exhausting، انا ماشيه بالشنطه دي على طول ايا كان بتكلم فيها او لا، هي ستيل موجوده حتى in the back of my mind. فلو انا عندي حد بقدر اتكلم معاه، لو عندي اوقات معينه بعرف ان انا اكون vulnerable فيها، مش شرط ده يكون مع كل الناس على فكره، part من ان انا يكون عندي boundaries، ان انا مش لازم اجي كل يوم الشغل كل حد عارف ان انا عندي مشاكل مثلا، مش لازم. this is part of my boundary and part of how I'm protecting myself and maybe other people around me برضه. بس لو انا عندي مكان معين، حد معين، اوقات معينه at least بعرف ان انا اكون فيها نفسي براحتي، اعرف ان انا break down if I need to break down، اعرف اعيط لو عايزه اعيط، اعرف احس بحاجات مختلفه. that's also important لانه being numb على طول is also taking things away from you and it's اكيد اوقات مش عارفه ابقى نفسي قوي لان انا I'm numbing everything. فحتى لو ليها فوائد كتير actually I would say I would dig deeper into، بس امتى ممكن اعرف افوت كده لحظات اعرف ابقى فيها بعبر عن نفسي مثلا اكتر and so on. Thank you for the question. أي أسئلة ثانية؟ وقاعد even though it's a very heavy topic بس بجد thank you for the wonderful questions, thank you for the wonderful talk يا سلمى، بجد very insightful والأسئلة حلوة قوي as usual. It makes me think كده about different things وحقيقي I'm very proud of you بجد. And having a student sit here is such a big moment، فيعني very proud of you and thank you.